Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Science Periodically, the show where you get to know the School of Science while taking a nice break from home isolation. My name is Dustin Ryder, and I'll be your host today. If you haven't noticed already, everyone has been muted. If you have any questions, you can send them through chat. And as you can see, I'm looking a little bit different from my photo. Each week, I'll be dressing as a different scientist where you get to guess who I am. To enter, you just get to send us a message on Instagram or email with that guess on who I am. We will put all the correct answers into a random drawing, and the winner gets to receive a science bobblehead. So just to go of a quick on who I am actually a science ambassador here at the IUPUI School of Science. I am also the Comic-Con box office manager for Indiana Comic-Con, Tampa Bay Comic-Con, and Atlanta Comic-Con for this year. And I also have 5 dogs, 2 of which are down in Indy, 2 are which here at my mom's, and 1 down at my dad's. So I'm also a man of my word. If you registered for this event, you will be receiving 1 random School of Science prize. If you haven't already registered, but really want that free gear, you can register down below, and Lori Hart is going to send that link into the chat. Make sure you use your IU email. This is kind of how we're going to know where to send that sweet, sweet free gear. So today we're kind of going to be briefly going over some science news, both here at IUPUI and around the world. After that, I'll be introducing this week's guest where you can chime in with any of your questions. So I also want to take a moment to recognize the class of 2020. Congratulations to all you seniors out there that graduated. Hard work really does pay off. I've been in your shoes before. Your graduation may look a little bit different than kind of what I was used to, but it really doesn't change how much work you guys put in. And we're really glad to be part of your future here at IUPUI. I also want to give a huge congratulations to the 836 science students that graduated this year. 709 of them were actually bachelor's degrees. We wish you guys the best in life and look forward to having an amazing set of alumni. So next we have the top 100. So what this is, it's an award ceremony where undergraduates from each school at IUPUI are kind of recognized based on their academic excellence, their campus leadership, and community engagement. This year, the School of Science had 38 students in the top 100. 4 of our students were also in IUPUI's top 10, and they're listed right there on the screen. We also can't really forget about the IUPUI's most outstanding student, Kira Couch. She's actually now a graduated biology student. And I think it's safe to say if the top 100 were a competition, the School of Science might win. So with the coronavirus, it's a bit difficult to go sightseeing right now. To get to know your new home Indy better, you can kind of search for our attractions such as like the Indianapolis Zoo or the Old National Center. So many of those Indy's best attractions are available as a virtual visit, and that's just a quick Google search. If you have any particular like virtual tours that you like, you can drop them in the chat. You guys are free to do that at any point. Now, heading a little bit away from IUPUI, are you or a loved one a giant T-Rex or any large dinosaur weighing over 2,200 pounds? Well, University of Maryland's Thomas Holtz found that these large dinosaurs weren't really exactly made for running. Holtz stated that the long legs didn't really beat out the stubby-legged dinosaurs in speed, but they surely did when it came to efficiency. While it may be terrifying to think of a giant T-Rex such as Sue barreling straight towards you, just know that they're built a little bit more for a marathon rather than sprinting. Kind of glad I did the 400-meter dash in high school. So rather than talking the whole time myself, I'd really like to introduce this week's guest, Andy Harris. Andy is a computer science senior lecturer and programmer here at IUPUI. He has experience with game programming and wrote a set of 4 dummy books. If you have any questions, please don't forget to put them in the chat. We'd be more than happy to answer. And then let me unmute you here, Andy. And there we go.
Hey,
How are
excellent.
you doing today, Andy?
I am looking terrific. And that is, I don't think that's a costume. You should just go with it.
I know,
Yeah,
I'm thinking it'd be a good everyday kind of wear.
If I let my hair grow out, it'll do that. That's the thing.
Yeah, if I had the ability to have a mustache, I think I could do it. I'd look
I
pretty
could
good.
pull it off. Not that I'm going to spoil anything, but I think I know who it is.
Okay, all right. We'll keep it towards the end.
Yeah,
right?
Marie Curie, clearly.
So do you
She
think
has
you
a-
can tell us a little bit more about yourself, Andy?
Sure, sure. I'm looking over the group. I think I've met a few of you. I teach computer science here at IUPUI, and have for many, many years. In fact, my first degree, well, all of my degrees are from here. So I was a student. I was an undergrad at IUPUI in the School of Education, and graduated in 1990.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was a special ed teacher of all things.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Now you're
yeah.
here.
So, yeah, good question. I'm not exactly sure. They got the class wrong or something. And so I was very interested. I grew up overseas because I was an Army brat, and we didn't have TV, and I was real interested in these things, these computers. The first one I saw, actually, I never saw it. It was just a terminal, and I thought that was interesting that you could do stuff with this. And I actually got to see a teletype machine in the 70s with a computer attached. My dad could have gotten arrested for letting me see that. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And so I wanted to learn about these things. And by the time I was in high school in the 80s, with no TV, that was in English. It was all in Japanese, which was awesome. But I didn't speak Japanese. So
I was going to say, I was like, do you know Japanese?
Well, see, that's the funny thing. Yeah, I learned some Japanese 30 years ago, and I forgot it all until I'm trying to learn Spanish now. And then when I'm in Nicaragua teaching, all my Japanese comes out. Buenos dias, Tomodachi-san. Yeah. I'm the only person in the world who's fluent in Spapanese.
Oh, gosh.
so I ended up buying a TRS-80 Model 1 with 16K of memory, baby. K. Yeah, not megabytes. Not gigabytes. K. 16K. My mom thought I was saving up for a car, and she was furious. Absolutely furious when I brought this thing home, because you couldn't do anything with it. Well, you had to pay extra. There were no disk drives yet. The only thing you could do is a cassette player. You had to pay extra for those, and so I used my other one, like with the Van Halen tapes, and you stick it in there, and it broke. I had to stick a chopstick in it.
Oh my gosh.
And if you wanted to write a paper on this thing, step one, write your own word processor, because you didn't have any software. It came with a programming language, and you had to write everything yourself. And so it was dumb. It was not a good idea to do this. And I didn't really think I was going to want to be a programmer. I really wanted to be a teacher. And so I ended up, the most cool kind of teaching I could think of was special ed. So I did that for a few years and loved it. And worked my way through I supported my teaching habit by writing software. And so I was doing commercial software development as a freelancer and as a consultant while I was a special ed teacher, which always cracked people up because, the special ed teacher isn't the one who does math, right? And then I stayed in school here. I was connected. I taught part-time for the department while I was a special ed teacher. And eventually we realized that it just made sense for me to make the switch over here. And so now, for the last, my goodness, 20 something years, I've been here teaching. I used to teach mostly non-CS majors, and this summer I get to do that again. That's really fun. But now I end up teaching the two freshman courses. So Intro to CS 1 and 2. Those are the courses that terrify people. And then I was always interested back since TRS-80 days in games. And so I'm also teaching the advanced game development classes for the CS department. So at 400
That's
level.
really awesome.
It's pretty cool stuff. It's really fun.
Yeah. So do you ever remind yourself of your old professors? I know you said you graduated in the 90s. So how was it kind of different then?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorites, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name here. Was a history professor who I thought I was pretty smart and everything.
Don't we all?
Yeah. And so I would write these papers and he would give me like C pluses and B minuses. And I'm like, dude, this was a good paper. It's like, you can do better. And I would keep working on it. I had this one, I just wanted so badly to compare chivalry with Bushido, which is the Japanese equivalent, sort of. It's a code of conduct of knights. I tried so hard, and he kept saying, "You bit off more than you can chew. You do not know what you're doing. This is crap." And it was so funny, and I was so mad at him. I was competing for a scholarship and didn't get it because I got a B- in his class. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened. And some of you are my students right now. You're like, crap, so he's going to give me a B-. But see, he was right. He was right. I was being lazy. I was counting on my charm and my natural ability. And so I ended up then writing books. I wrote a bunch of books and being hired on the faculty. And one of the first things I did when I came back to the faculty of the same school is I went and took him to lunch.
Oh, wow.
And said, "Thank you for the B-. Can I try again?" And he said, "No."
Oh, a little bit of a letdown. I guess, if it was a blessing in disguise.
But, I'm going to write it one day and get it published somewhere. So
yeah, that's what really counts. I mean, you're already a published author to begin with. So.
Sure, but he was right. And I learned a lot about writing, which is funny because writing and teaching and computing, they seem like they might not be the same thing. But I'm pretty certain they are. I think computing is really a communication discipline, like most of science today. And I'm not sure we're doing it as well as we can because people don't seem to be hearing us.
That's fair, yeah. So, listen, I'm a forensic science student, and I know like a little bit about Office products and HTML. What do you think? Do you think that's like kind of like enough knowledge for me, at least in my discipline? Because I know a lot of students are going to kind of wonder that because, computer science is kind of like a key part of everything, kind of.
Yeah, let me throw this back to you. Let me throw this back. Okay. So I want to understand forensics. Do I really need chemistry? Do I really need biology?
Yes.
Right, but I've watched that show, that CSI show. They don't really do it on there.
Don't remind me.
I know.
Every time that's what we always talk about. We're like, it's not like that.
Oh my word, yes. And well, it's funny. As soon as some hacker comes on a show, on a movie or TV, my kids are like, "Get Dad out of the room because he's just gonna blow it."
Exactly. My mom will be like, "What are you talking about?" I'd be like, "It doesn't take. It's a lot longer than that."
It's not like that. Well, and I would argue that computing today might be more central to forensics and to biology and to chemistry and some of the more traditional types of science, even than the more fundamental ones. Because honestly, computer science is not using Office. Yeah. Computer science is not using Word. I mean, that's like comparing the guy who changes your oil, which is an important and good job, to an automotive engineer, right? They're not, they work on cars, but it's not the same at all. Computer science is really applied math. And I would argue that in your work and in pretty much every scientist's work, that side of things, having enough math to do that you really need to pull out a power tool, isn't a secondary part of your job. It is your job.
That is
true. One of the things I've noticed has changed in science. I'm also on the board of the State Science Fair, so I get to hang out with. I helped to run the State Science Fair this year. It was pretty cool. We did the very first virtual State Science Fair in Indiana history.
Oh, wow.
Managed to pull the sucker off.
I was going to say, I was like...
It was, well, and it came early. So it was before we really knew that things were going to get serious. So we had to pull it off. And we had some really great folks. But something I've noticed about science has changed since I've been doing it. Is when I was an undergrad and many of my colleagues, the main problem of science was writing experiments to find the data. So you always had your hypothesis, right? And you always had this thing you're trying to prove or not prove. But the hard part is, how do I get at the data? Well, if you look at how the world has changed today, getting the data isn't the hard part anymore, is it? Now, most scientists have too much data.
Yeah.
Getting the data was the easy part. Now we have so much data because we have these automated systems and we have these marvelous techniques for getting data, and we can do these computerized experiments where the software-driven hardware is doing amazing amounts of work. Well, now the problem isn't finding the data, and now the problem is figuring out what the data means.
Yes.
And what is that truly about? Well, sort of the subtitle of this discussion could be, all science today is data science. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't
And like
think of a science today that isn't really ultimately about data.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I could tell you a funny story about that from biology point of view.
Yeah.
So I was hanging out in my office one day, and this grad student walks in and he says, you're Andy Harris. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, it's true.
Oh, dang.
I know. And he said, I really need some help. I'm like, cool, have a seat. Turns out he's a grad student in biology, and he was doing this problem with genetics. And he said, my professors told me I need to write a database in PHP to help solve this problem in genetics. And so I said I didn't know how to do that. And they said, well, go buy a book and learn it. So he said, I went out, I bought a book, and I started to learn it. And I got most of the way through, but I got stuck on some things. And I looked in the back of the book, and it said, Andy Harris, IUPUI. And I'm like, oh, you're going to call me out for not teaching you. And he said, well, no, I just didn't understand what you're doing. So I'm like, cool, let's have lunch. So he and I and his professors got together in the conference room. And I said, you're going to have to ELI 5 for me, because I don't know what's going on here with this science you're trying to do. So explain like I'm 5. Show me what's going on here, because I understand databases, but this genetic stuff, I mean, help me, I don't understand. And so they spent 2 hours patiently teaching the idiot that I am the particular problem that they were trying to solve and the thing. And I'm just, at some point, I'm barely hanging on. I'm just trying to surf with these people. And at some point I said something like, okay, so what you're telling me is we're looking for this set of characters that is happening at least this far, but not that far from this other set of characters. And I swear, those guys got up from the table and like chest bumped each other. Apparently, I had discovered something. And the funny thing is, because I didn't understand the biology and the genetics, I was looking at it from a point of view they didn't have. And of course, I didn't have their point of view.
Yeah, that's true.
They couldn't have solved it themselves. I certainly couldn't get anywhere close to solving this thing. But because I was looking at it from a data point of view, we together were able to solve a problem, to see a pattern that we couldn't see individually. They put my name on the paper.
Oh.
So
okay.
I'm a published biology researcher now.
I was
still
gonna say,
don't know
like
what
a
we were
different
talking
field,
about.
but hey.
I still don't know what we were talking about. But do you see what a beautiful thing it is? Because I think this ability to, what we do in computer science is we look at 2 things. We look at patterns in data. So how do you see data in ways that we can see patterns that wouldn't be there anyway? And of course, the obvious thing everybody's looking at right now is machine learning, which I've got a rant on that if you want it. We'll save it for later.
Like another time.
We could do a whole thing on that. Because it's sexy. It's kind of the CSI of computer science.
Oh, okay.
That and hacking are kind of the thing that everybody just uses without knowing what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But where was I going with this? I'm sorry.
Hey, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, well, and I'm not the best either. So in any case, you're not going to get where you're going if you can't back up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And see things from a different point of view. So what we do is we talk about data. That's where I was going, and algorithms, which is, what are the patterns in data? How do we reorganize and kick the data around so we can see things that we couldn't see before? Can we structure things in a new way? Can we look at relationships between elements of data in ways that let us see patterns that were before this time invisible?
Yeah.
And then the other thing we talk about is algorithms, which is patterns of solving problems. How do you look at solving a problem in a new way? Can you find a way to get new efficiencies in solving a problem, or can you find a way to identify bottlenecks in the way that you're trying to solve a problem? And if you ask me, aren't those the central ideas of science?
Do you want me to ask you that?
Well, I can ask you that. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, yes, I definitely agree, but we also do have one question because this
Oh,
pertains
okay.
to the topic we're speaking
Sure,
about.
sure.
So Josh wants to know, Andy, did you ever have a similar experience to that where someone was kind of asking for your help and that you tried to explain it from your perspective and you accidentally made a breakthrough with it?
That's exactly what just happened. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you asked that question before I told that story. If so, just call me prescient. But yeah, that happens. That happens all the time. Because again, I mean, look at great scientists, and I don't claim to be one, but look at great scientists all over the place. And most of the time, their best ideas come from just this side of utter confusion. It's not a problem if it's easy. And so I can't tell you how many times, I mean, in programming, we have this thing, and you know, I joke about it, that my dog is one of the best programmers I know.
Oh yeah, why is that?
Yeah, because I'll get stuck on a problem and I'll get stuck on it and bash my head against the monitor a few times. And then what's amazing is that eventually, and I tell the students to do this, but I don't listen to my own advice. I just get up and I take the dog for a walk. And as we're walking around the neighborhood, I'm explaining out loud my coding problem to my dog. And he's just looking for things to pee on. And my neighbors are like, I don't know what's going on. He's mumbling math to the dog. It's very strange. But the funny thing is, I cannot tell you how many times the hardest problems I've ever solved, I've ended up solving when I'm in the shower, I'm dreaming, I'm walking the dog, I'm driving a car. Almost never do I solve the real problems when I'm typing on the keyboard.
Isn't that how it always works?
Well, I think there's something psychological. You psychologists can help us with this. I know there's some of you out there.
I was going to say, there might be some in the chat.
I think there are, and I hope you can explain it to me because I see it all the time. But even in software engineering, there's often, like they call it rubber duck programming, where in a lot of companies, you're not allowed to ask another person to help you with a problem until you've explained it to the rubber duck. And they actually have a rubber duck, and they have people sit there and explain their thing to the rubber duck.
I love that.
And the amazing thing is it works. My dog has helped me solve some really amazingly challenging problems because he's just sitting there. Hey, Dad, let's go for a walk.
He's like, yeah, walk, and
yeah,
talk.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I hope he doesn't hear me because he's going to burst in here.
I heard the word.
Well, I love these questions. Keep them going. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be driven by me. So if you guys have some other questions, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Well, since we're on that topic, we have actually Sophia. Sorry if I said that wrong. She says, how should one get prepared for science now today? Take a computer science class in college?
More than one. Yeah, honestly, how many math classes do you need?
I have to take up to Calc 2 for the life sciences.
Well, that's not what I didn't ask you how many you had to take. How many do you need?
That's true.
Right? Because you find yourself in science having to solve these problems that eventually they come back so often to math. Right? Yeah. And here's what I'm discovering with a lot of scientists who are graduating today. They're taking a couple of programming classes, which is good. I don't think programming and computer science are the same at all, by the way. Programming is to computer science like a microscope is to biology.
Okay.
So, and I think that's important, right? Because using a microscope is a very important part of doing biology. But would you call biology microscope science?
No, not really.
We shouldn't call this thing computer science either, for the same reason, because that's not really what we do. We don't study computers. They're not that interesting. We study ways of thinking about solving problems. And whether or not you're actually typing code on a computer or not, is there a kind of science that doesn't do that today? Do you have a lab that's not producing huge amounts of information? Do you have a paper that you've written that doesn't involve statistical analysis?
That's very true.
I can't think of any. I mean, I can't think of any science papers I've read, even, the stuff that I'm doing with the science fair. I'm telling these high school kids, you need to learn some data science. You need to learn some hardcore stats. And you need to learn how to write programs in something, R, Python. I don't care if you all learn C++. I mean, if you want to, I know a guy.
Oh, yeah. Is his name
sure,
Andrew?
I could teach that. Yeah. Name a language. I've probably taught it.
Oh, we got actually another one from Josh.
Okay.
This is for you. What field do you enjoy the most assisting with solving their problems? So, like biology, manufacturing. What do you think?
Here's what I love. If it's the farther away it is from my knowledge, the more fun it is for me.
That's true.
Because that way I learn more from you. So I really enjoy working in an area that may not be something I'm already strong in, because I get to learn about it. I had a student come in one time for a final project, and she was like, I got nothing. I got no idea what I can do for my final project. I said, what's fun in your life? And she said, okay, you'll think this is weird. And I'm like, yes.
Even better.
Yeah, I know. I got super excited because she said, this is really weird. And I'm like, go for it. What do you got? And she said, okay, I have the strangest hobby in the world. I love to come up with formulations for feeding thoroughbred horses.
Oh, wow.
And I said, that's so cool and so weird. And I love it.
Exactly. You can definitely go somewhere with that too.
Well, she ended up, and this was a gal who you just wouldn't expect to be a computer scientist or even a scientist. She was in her 50s.
Oh,
was
wow.
taking school with her son, had been kicked around by life. One of these people who people had told her she wasn't going to do anything, and man, did she kick their butts.
I was going to say, it sounds like it.
So she ended up converting her final project, which was a calculator for producing this thoroughbred horse feed, into an app that's making good amounts of money. And so I would have never thought of that because I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was so much fun for me to be able to take what I do know, which is this notion of we can think about data, we can think about problems, we can think about packaging things together in solutions, and we can use these stupid computer things to kind of help us do that. But it's not about the computer. That's not what I'm teaching about. It's this computer that I care about. Well, the ones on the screen there. That I care about.
So I always think it's really cool because just like from listening to you talk about this, computer science, at least in the department IUPUI, you kind of are always going to get mixed in with some type of department on campus, especially in the School of Science. And I think that's really cool because it opens up like everybody's perspective, like you were mentioning. Because as a forensic scientist, like I mentioned this earlier, in population genetics, we've used I think it's called PuTTY, and we're gonna have to use R. So it's like having that statistics and just knowing that, like what you said, it's like data science, and it's an amazing part about it. And nobody ever really kind of thinks about that.
I think you really need to. I think that, and I'm talking to our science fair people, and I'm talking about K-12 folks, and here on the university, I've been encouraging. I'm teaching a class right now, N207. Anybody taking N207?
I have.
Did you take that? Okay. Yeah, it's way too lightweight. I'd like to make it a lot harder.
Why is that?
But because we're barely giving you enough. Okay. You are capable of doing far more than we're asking you to do in that course.
That kind of just like it brushes on the surface, right?
It gets you on the surface, and that's great. But I don't think you just need like milk. I think you're ready for some meat.
Okay.
And so I would like to see maybe a class like that in your freshman year, but then maybe something like with PAR and with Python, data science, a little more solid database work, a little more sophisticated programming, because I just don't know of any scientists who aren't going to need that.
Yeah. So actually, Denise also sends in the chat, what advice would you give to someone who enjoys working with science, computers, and data, but really, really dislikes math?
Where are you, Denise? You are my favorite. Okay. First of all, I hear this all the time. I can't tell you how many people tell me that they hate math. But my first answer to that is, I think you hated math class. I'm not sure you've even met math. Because if you do love science, if you do love data, if you do love computer, congratulations, you like math. You like a form of it, and it's just the truth.
Yeah, that's
that you
fair.
do already like math. Now the question is, okay, how do we get from the math that I like to the math that I didn't like? And there's a couple of answers to that. First of all, I completely reject the when are we going to use this in real life argument, because I've watched young people play Fortnite. Right? When exactly do you expect to jump out of a floating school bus with a huge balloon animal axe? Yet you practice that for hours. So I reject that argument completely. But I do say this. Math, I teach math at a high school level, and my students are like, you're a crazy man. But here's why, because I don't think math is what we've been learning in high school. I think math is one of the more creative subjects there is. Math is closer, I think, to a good poetry class than what you've probably thought it was. Math is about being able to use your brain, to tune your brain in a way that is amazing. And math to me is like a martial art for the brain. I really think it is. I really think it is, because the whole idea, right? You know, you see people go to the Taekwondo studio, right?
Yeah.
Do they really expect to be attacked by a dude with a sword? I mean, if they are, cool, they'll be ready.
Yeah, they're gonna be ready.
But I don't think that's why they do it. I mean, are these people that afraid of being attacked that they go 3 hours a week to practice defending themselves? I don't think so. I think that they're going because the experience of learning how to tune your brain and your body for extreme situations that may or may never arise, that has its own benefits, that has its own side effects, that are maybe better than the main effect.
Yeah,
And
so I'm gonna stop you right there.
Okay.
Mostly
because I
because
could
we've
go
got
for
2
another 2
questions
weeks.
to go over here.
Okay, cool.
So Army says, what advice would you give to someone who's new to the science department, so probably like incoming freshman?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I am not the only one. We are thrilled you're here. I am really upset that we're not going to be physically in the building as much as we want to be right now. But that does not mean that we aren't welcoming. Come here, you're going to have fun, you're going to feel stupid. And that's part of learning. You're going to come here and you're going to be like, I used to think I was smart.
And then that's when your B- in history came through.
Sure. And so these things are going to happen, and that's fine. Make friends. Get to know your professors, talk to us. We love it. We really do. We want you to come into office hours. I'm sitting around sometimes in office hours like, where are they? And I'll hear from them the day after I turn in grades. But I want to hear from you before that, before it gets crazy. Here's the other thing for any science major, I would say, is when you get lost, that is not weakness. Weakness is when you don't use that. So I would encourage you with everything I've got to say, when you get lost, call your TA, go to your professor's office hours, talk to your friends, but mainly there's people who are paid to help you, and they want to. They really do.
Yeah, and I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah, people don't get into, like, especially computer science. Do you know how much computer science people can make in real life? People don't do this because we're trying to make the big bucks. We're teaching because we love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of most sciences. You look right now in our world and you see folks in all the various sciences doing quite well. The people who are teaching it because they want to.
I agree.
And I can say on our campus, my colleagues and friends are absolutely incredible. We were ranked as one of the top places for undergraduate learning for a very good reason.
That actually brings us to the next part. Do you think incoming computer science majors should kind of have previous knowledge on certain programming languages? The big sigh.
No. And here's why. I'd rather you have no knowledge than the wrong knowledge.
That's fair. That's actually very true.
Because what happens sometimes, in our discipline more than I think other sciences, because if you want to study biology, you probably met a biologist. You might have taken a biology class that was taught by a person who had also taken a biology class.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn chemistry, you've probably seen chemistry before. The way our culture is right now and our educational system is that by the time you decide you want to study computer science, you may have never met a computer scientist.
That's
There
fair.
may not, there almost certainly isn't a person with a computer science credentials at your school, at your high school. There may or may not be any programming teachers at all. And literally they often are the wrestling coach or the shop teacher. I know this
Wow.
because I taught some of them. And they're doing their very, very, very best. But we right now don't have a solid way to teach programming at the K-12. We're working on it. I'm part of the team. We're training teachers this summer. We're doing some good stuff finally. But what often happens is you're either self-taught. Okay, I got a great idea. Why don't you hire a teacher who knows nothing? Who knows as little as you do and maybe doesn't even know how to teach either.
Okay.
That's what self-teaching is. Or you use videos, or you have a cousin, or you just do your
That's
best.
true.
And that's all great. There's nothing wrong with that. But what often happens is I see people who were way better programmers than their high school programming teacher because she was a shop teacher, who was doing her best. God love her. But then you begin to think that's the truth. Or every adult you've ever met says, wow, you're brilliant. Can you hack into the CIA? And the first time you encounter somebody who's actually been doing it seriously for a while, that's a big shock. And so bad habits are very, very hard to unteach. So I'm not saying you're doomed if you already know how to program. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is if you don't, that's actually maybe easier for you, is that we can start with on a clean plate. And I don't have much expertise, but I have taught people to go from not being a programmer to being a programmer for dang near 30 years now.
That's what really counts.
And I can tell you, if you really want to learn how to write computer programs, I don't care about the language. I don't care about what you're going to do with it after. I don't care about what computer you're using. You want to learn how to write computer programs? If you're willing to work, we could do it. And what your background is, I have no idea what it means to have aptitude for something. I don't know what that means. The whole notion of natural talent seems like a scam to me.
That's fair.
But what I do know is I have met people who are willing to work hard, and I know people who are going to give up when it gets hard. And that's my big question to you is who of those people are you? And you can change it if you're not the one you want to be. Do you want to change that?
Yeah, and that's like the big factor is just wanting to change and be, and get and succeed in what you want to do. So I know we're running pretty high on time. So to kind of wrap this up, I know we've mentioned it previously, like kind of what do you have for advice for incoming freshmen? So how about we switch it up? Where's your favorite place to eat in Indy? Where do you recommend for them to come down?
Goodness. I don't know. Well, my house. Come on over. Yeah, grilling.
I think that you're going to have to make food for 27 people. So
let's do it. Yeah, party. When we can social distance, we'll do it.
Yeah, I was gonna
when
say,
we don't have to. Yeah, when this is done. Yeah. I don't know. I actually don't eat out that much. I like to try new local things. So here. Fisher's, they've got this new like restaurant incubator where people can try out brand new restaurants. Unfortunately, they opened it and then the next day the quarantine hit. So I'm really looking forward to kind of going there and trying new things. I love international food. Because I've done some traveling, I love Central American food. It's not all Mexican. There's so many other amazing things.
Do you know of any good ones in Indy or around the area?
Yeah, I have some friends from Guatemala who actually run a Mexican restaurant, but they've started to put Guatemalan and Salvadoran food. Well, they started to put it on their lunch buffet. Of course, that's not happening.
Yeah, at least not right now.
Yeah, but that's pretty cool. They're on Pendleton Pike, so that's a pretty neat place to go. And I've been encouraging them. Look, you should embrace the stuff that you guys make in your own culture because it's so amazing. And I think Indiana's ready for it. I think Indianapolis is ready for things beyond just what we already have.
Yeah. All right. So does anybody have any more questions for Andy? Let's see if anybody pops up in the chat. Oh, okay, here we go. Andy, how long did it take you to learn Japanese?
I still don't know any.
You're like, a long time. It's going on 30 years so far.
So far, 30 years, and I haven't used it until it's time to learn Spanish. And, yeah.
Isn't that how it always works? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had a student in Nicaragua who I know speaks Spanish. He came up to me and started speaking in Japanese, and my brain exploded. I just couldn't do it.
Oh no. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Andy. I hope you have a really great day, and we do appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. If you will, share my email address. I'd love if people have any questions, you want to stop by, you're interested in taking a class or just chatting, send my address out. Lori has it. I think you have it too.
All right. Got it.
I'd love to hear from y'all.
Yeah. So then go right ahead. We'll probably send that out at some point during the chat. So we're going to wrap things up a little bit here. And again, that's Andy Harris. He's one of our senior computer science lecturers. He teaches CSCI 230, 240 class. It's a beginning programming class. So if you really enjoyed talking to Andy and getting to know him a little bit, you guys can check that out. It's open to all the majors. So next week's episode, we do, okay, look, Andy sent in his email address in the chat. So there you guys go for that if you'd like to send him a message. So next week's episode of Science Periodically, we're going to have Diana Sims Harris. She's actually the School of Science Director of Student Affairs. And hold on, let me get out of the chat real quick. All right, there. And I was like, wait a minute.
You don't need any hints.
I was gonna say, so yeah, also, we'll get back to this in a minute here. Next week's episode, like I said, Diana Sims Harris, she's the School of Science Director of Student Affairs. Her photo is gonna be on the next slide that I have up for you guys. She's also one of the most wonderful people that I have had the chance to meet. Diana can really answer your questions about STEM housing, bridge, orientation, and pretty much everything else that you might have. And we can really imagine how many questions you guys might have given the coronavirus situation. So make sure you guys tune in next week, prepare those questions. And don't forget to register in that link that Lori sent. You're going to get that free gear from that. And you can also send us a message with what famous scientist you think that I am. And you're going to win one of those science bobbleheads right there on your screen. Love those things. They're really fun to play with. You can also email that to our email, which is science@iupui. I have a hint on there. I won a Nobel Peace Prize during the 1920s. So just keep that in mind if you want to Google all that. And then here we go. Let me put that photo of Diana right on there. So again, she'll be up on next week. And if you guys, I also have a request for all of you. I really want to make next week's episode really good. So if you could send in photos of your pets to our Instagram or our Facebook, which are just IUPUI Science, I'd really just love to cry over how cute all the animals are on next week's episode. So make sure to include their names. And yes, snakes do in fact count. I love seeing them. We do have more science students and our science recruiter, Lori Hart, who I've mentioned earlier, who's been sending links in the chat. And you guys are more than welcome to stay over, especially if you have any leftover questions. Otherwise, you guys can tune in next week for another episode of Science Periodically. Again, we'll have Diana Sims Harris on there. She's on your screen. And I hope all of you have enjoyed this kind of break from home isolation. Have a good one. Let me stop sharing my screen there for a minute. All right. You guys are more than welcome to also unmute yourselves, especially if you have any questions. If not, just make sure you guys register in that link and we'll be able to send you that free science gear. I know our science recruiter, Lori, is going to unmute herself, and she actually put it in the chat. We're going to be posting this on our YouTube as well later this week. I'm going to have a transcript up as well. So if you guys want to, you can check that out. So it looks like our other science student we have here is Karina, so she can also answer any questions if you guys have them. Like I said, feel free to unmute yourself. Andy seems to be still in here, so if you have any questions for him, send them in the chat, or you can, like I said, unmute yourselves.